Hey guys, Omni here. We had Loki drop yesterday, and I gotta say, out of the three shows, I think it had the strongest pilot. I did really enjoy WandaVision's opening pilot episode. That was mostly out of like nostalgia and just the production quality of that, but this was on its own. I think it's just on a whole different level. One, by default, it's longer. We get right out of the gate the premise, the story, the intrigue, the setup, the idea, so we didn't really have to wait a lot to really figure things out. And it was a lot of fun, hit a lot of emotional beats, gets through the whole range of emotion, I think. I don't think there was ever a point in the episode where I was angry, though. But pretty close. We did have some laughs and almost some tears. Almost. And the only reason we didn't quite get there is because we've seen a lot of that before. So it was just kind of some reflection on there. But I love what they're doing with the character. I love just the way Tom Hiddleston has been playing it. And I'm sure, especially in those credits and throughout the office of the TVA, there was a lot of lovely Easter eggs we missed. So this time around, of course, if you're new here, you might not know, we kind of, after each one of these episodes, we go right on over to New Rockstars whenever they drop their Easter eggs, break down details you may have missed, little videos to kind of see what all I didn't catch. And then see, of course, they kind of speculate here and there. They also are probably the ones that kind of peddled the Mephisto train so hard in WandaVision, so I'm curious to see what they say about that. Now, I know the director themselves of the show, and like, I know I did the little like wink wink to the camera when we saw the devil on there or whatever, but the director has already said that that was not meant to be a nod towards Mephisto, but yet the inspiration of Loki for the Christian version of the devil, that imagery with the horns. So that was hinting at this alternate version of Loki. Again, I was just playing up the meme, and some people took that too seriously and was like freaked out on it. So I'm curious to see what good old Voss here has to say. Now, this is a little bit of a longer video than what we've had with them before. So to help myself while we're going through this, I might stop and start throughout the video to get out my thoughts, because trying to remember all of the details at the end of the video, for me, is not possible. So I want to have at least the best discussion we can have about what is presented, and shock and awe at some things we might have missed. That all being said, guys, let's strap in and let's do this thing. Here we go.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of Marvel's Loki, episode 1, in which the God of Mischief learns he's just one Infinity Stone in a big box. From the many MCU callbacks to a cartoon I hope you're all taking notes during, there is so much to unpack, so I'm gonna break this down
this
shot
little
by shot
animation.
for all the cool details that you might have missed. We open on New York City, 2012, the scene of Loki's escape when we last saw him in Avengers Endgame. Actually, this shot is the same exact establishing shot used in Endgame, but with the portal beam, the Chitauri, and a few explosions removed now that the battle's over. And listen to this 4-note chime the episode opens with. Yeah, this is directly from the Endgame score when Tony snuck back into the tower. Notice how the
I thought it sounded familiar, but I didn't. I didn't pick up on that at all.
On old train station signs, matching the overall analog production design of the TVA, as if they're flipping back to the state. And this prologue now mixes in alternate takes from Chris Evans during Loki's Endgame arrest.
On my way down to coordinate search and rescue.
On my way down to coordinate search and rescue.
On my way down to coordinate search and rescue.
On my way down to coordinate search and rescue.
Yeah, notice how in this new take,
it was a little different.
Impression is more robotic and less of the sir, yes sir, it was an Endgame. It's just an example of how we are already seeing variations to what we saw before. And although it's not focused on, they kept in Ant-Man. He's still barely visible running up Tony's arm as he closes the suitcase. So then downstairs, as the fumbled Tesseract slides to Loki's feet, listen to its sound. Yeah, now it's a much fuller choral chime compared to the sound we heard in Endgame. showing how for Loki, this Tesseract is still a sacred key to the God King status that he seeks. But later on, as he realizes this Infinity Stone is literally one of an infinite amount of these rocks, that precious hum fades away. But not knowing that yet, Loki zips away with the Space Stone, leaving Thor's
That's a nice
voice
little
calling out
detail.
in the void.
Where's Loki? Loki?
Audio also taken from Endgame in the background.
Where's Loki? Loki?
And this panic tells us that Loki just created a disrupted history, displacing himself from his destined historical path of accompanying Thor back to Asgard as he was supposed to. This is why Loki is a variant in violation of the TVA's sacred timeline. By teleporting with the Space Stone, he didn't go back in time or enter any new reality, but he did warp this history, causing it all to branch off from the sacred timeline. Now, of course, the Avengers also created branch timelines by taking each stone, but when Cap returned those stones, those branches were erased. However, Cap returning the Tesseract in 1970 would not have erased Loki's theft in 2012, leaving him as the one lingering paradox that the TVA is super pissed off about. Then the Marvel Studios title turns green.
Well, not the only one. If that was the only one, we wouldn't see all these duplicates, but in like the TVA office. So this has definitely happened in other ways. The deviations just naturally occur on their own. They got to. It's an interesting concept, but it's definitely something I can't wait to see if they elaborate on it more. So yeah, because otherwise, like if that was the only deviation and they fixed it and now we just have the time stream again, I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Let's go.
With a flash of gold, of course, the colors of Loki. Then we find ourselves in Mongolia's Gobi Desert. This cool shot of an insect crawling reflected upside down in a droplet of water, recalling this Loki's recent arrogance.
An ant has no quarrel with a boot.
Of course, threw back at his face later in that movie.
Ant. Boot.
And now this pompous god is about to get stomped back down to earth as an insect compared to the might of the TVA. And in
that
this shot,
shot
the camera pushes in on
was
Loki's
so
crash
good.
landing in the sand, recalling the shot of Iron Man's crash landing in the first Iron Man film. A similar tale of an egomaniac forced to reconcile with his actions, transitioning from a violent villain to just a mischievous hero. Since remember, this is the 2012 era Loki, not the nicer guy that he evolved to be in the later films, though this episode does kind of get him close to it via traumatic home movies. But yes, the TVA, Time Variance Authority. These are the Marvel time cops. They prosecute timeline violators with an army of Minutemen, foot soldiers, chronomonitors, and judges. Representing them now is Hunter B-15. Her scanner labels Loki as variant L1130. And notice how the units drop from 5 toward 0, meaning their whole sacred timeline is always just 5 whatever these units are away from branches veering into redline territory, just showing how delicate this timeline really is. The TVA's weapons are these glowing batons, which could be handheld versions of the retroactive cannon that the TVA uses in the comics to erase people from existence, aka retcon.
Well,
B-15's glows violet, unlike the others that glow orange. As we see later, orange is
Oh,
a color used
okay.
to reset violators to their native timeline. So
I didn't even
maybe
pick up
violet
on
is
them
a setting
having
used to
different
stun
colors.
a violator in amazing slow motion.
You're now moving at 1/16 speed.
Yeah, them having those big ass cannons and wielding those around probably
Yikes,
wouldn't be
forcing
all that
Loki to feel
wieldy
all
for the
this pain,
show.
but dilated out 16 times longer than he should. Punishment via time dilation is actually a recurring theme on the show Black Mirror, in which actress Wunmi Masaku, who plays Hunter B-15, previously tortured Wyatt Russell's character in a time-dilated hell. So they end up pruning this timeline with a reset charge that begins orange and then
I've only
turns
seen one
purple.
episode of Black
Now,
Mirror.
Previously, purple sorcery has been associated with Agatha Harkness. Before that, Dormammu in the Dark Dimension. And in Doctor Strange, remember, timeline reversal like this was considered a form of dark magic. Loki creator Michael Waldron wrote the latest draft of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And in an interview with MT, he teased that he may have been smart enough to include these links between the two titles.
Did you set up anything in Loki episodes that you could cash in later on in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, or call back anything in Doctor Strange from Loki?
think that's something you'll have to watch it all and find out if I was that smart or not.
And we'll talk about more of these later.
I don't know about that,
The TVA,
but
with
it's an
interiors
interesting
that
thought.
are often
We'll keep
colored
an eye
with
on that one.
eye-scorching orange. This color was often used in early 70s designs to come off as
Yeah.
warm and inviting, but now just come off as cringy and uncomfortable and tortuous, much like the orange Miss Minutes. Notice how another variant is a Skrull wearing a tracksuit. Skrulls, of course, the shape-shifting race seen in Captain Marvel, Spider-Man Far From Home, WandaVision. Skrulls are just gonna start showing up everywhere as we head towards Secret Invasion. P-15 rewinds Loki back to her with a device later called the Time Twister. Now, in the comics, the Time Twisters are actually beings created by accident during the creation of the Time Keepers. They move backward in time and destroy all in their path. Here, the device is a remote leash to whomever is wearing the collar. Comedian Josh Fado plays variant named Martin.
My dad is on the board of Goldman Sachs.
With a name like Martin, I gotta wonder if he could be based on Martin Shkreli. But either way, how did this rich brat from Earth end up as a timeline variant? Could this be Jimmy Woo's witness in federal witness protection who went missing with no explanation?
That. All right, I don't know. We got some stretches, but if he just goes missing, the guy would still be around. He's got to exist unless he survived something he wasn't supposed to. I think this is a case of one of those speculations that they like to throw into some of what's happening. I don't see the correlation to that, but we still never got an answer to that.
Are we ever gonna get an answer to that? I don't know. And then comedian Eugene Cordero plays TVA clerk named Casey. Notice his pen's in his front pocket. Later in the episode, the ink will leak more and more into his shirt. Poor guy. Here he takes the Tesseract.
Can you at least tell me what it is?
It's the Tesseract. Be very careful with it.
Sounds dumb.
Yeah, Casey thinks the Tesseract is dumb because he has a ton of confiscated space stones, none of them stored in a stupid Tesseract. Also, maybe Casey knows a Tesseract is technically a fourth dimensional hypercube incapable of being seen by human 3D perception, but he doesn't know what a fish is. I love it. Loki meets this pervy declothing bot who greets him with a slow forming smile that ends with the right eye twitching a bit. Just a little unnerving to have the thing stripping you naked glitch, but as we will see, the TVA's clockwork is a bit glitchy in general. The transcript room features a cat who's also on this guy's mug, or is it a flurkin? Also, I love how this guy is playing solitaire on his little orange display when Loki dropped in. Poor guy. His wall clock, like all the clocks we see in the TVA, features multiple hands and more than 12 numbers around the circumference. Everything Loki has ever said is printed out on this dot matrix printer, though as someone who's over 1,000 years old, I would think that stack should be way larger. And then Loki
That's
gets
what
his
I
body
said.
scan for his temporal aura, which prints out on Polaroid film, kind of like a heat index, but presumably for time, almost like instant carbon dating. And the attendant asks,
"Please confirm to your knowledge that you are not a fully robotic being. We're born
I
an
love
organic
this
creature
bit
and do in
so
fact
much.
possess what many cultures would call a soul."
yeah, he specifies fully robotic and born organic because we know cybernetically reassembled beings like Nebula probably have a soul, I think. But also just like this idea that there are Ultron-like robots out there that are trying to pass as organic life forms, bringing up an interesting question that Loki asks.
Do a lot of people not know if they're robots? What if I was a robot and I didn't know it?
Yeah, some existential panic from Loki, recalling the Voight-Kemp test of Blade Runner that was used to test AI replicants who might not even know if they're robots. But I see this as one first step.
I've still
by
never
Loki
seen Blade
from
Runner
godly
either.
Arrogance to mortal fear. Now the next room has this poster showing Miss Minutes warning, "Behave or you'll get your clock cleaned," which is literally what the Minutemen do with their ret cannons to reset people's clocks. Actually, there are great TVA posters everywhere in this place. Zero tolerance over the ticket check-in window because yeah, they got zero.
I want to know
tolerance over
what
whether or
the
not you
rest
got a
of the
ticket.
little
Later,
items
there's
are.
one showing a shadowy suited figure reading "Always Watching." You can see a better shot of it in the credits. Just a big brothery and warning from the high ranks of the TVA. Another one saying "Stable Society, Tidy Timeline," with a dude pruning branches and a poor bird looking at him while he does so. Just an example of how the TVA doesn't really care about any worthy life in new branch timelines that get formed. It's all about the trunk. Then Tidy Cubicle Healthy Timeline with branch variants of a clerk at his neat desk, but then one red line variant standing on his desk going nuts. Yeah, the propaganda prioritizes neatness over everything else. And then later on, one Nexus events must be pruned. But of course, we get this adorable animation from TVA mascot Miss Minutes, voiced by Tara Strong in a southern accent, kind of like Mr. DNA explaining the science of Jurassic Park.
Oh, Mr. DNA.
See, like, I related it much more to
By the way,
Fallout
we
than
have
anything.
A whole Loki-inspired
I didn't even, like,
merch
think
line
of
at our merch store, NewRockstarsMerch.com, in which
Mr.
Miss Minutes
DNA.
shows up quite a bit, in which you can show some worship of this Miss Minutes figure. Check it out, NewRockstarsMerch.com. So Miss Minutes explains a new MCU history.
Long ago, there was a vast multiversal war, but then the all-knowing timekeepers emerged, bringing peace by reorganizing the multiverse into a single timeline, the sacred timeline.
So, according to this, the MCU used to exist as a multiverse of timelines that warred with each other, but the timekeepers interfered with that natural state.
Quick thought. They used to be the multiverse. There used to be this this disconnected that warred with each other. Could this also be like a meta hint at the warring, like, movie studios where the Marvel timelines were spread and the IPs were all over these different houses and they were all competing? Just a thought I just had watching this. Probably not. Probably just me with some meta commentary. Just wanted to throw that in there.
Deciding to merge all the timelines into one sacred timeline,
And now they're all owned by Disney.
everything we have seen in the MCU so far has been a kind of intermediary
all.
peacetime. See, in the comics, the three timekeepers, named Ast, Vanth, and Zorth, are creations of He Who Remains, the final TVA agent at the end of all time, to pass on lessons to the next universal cycle. But as neutral time deities, these guys are kind of assholes. They at times partner with folks like Immortus, aka Kang the Conqueror, to wage conflict with the Avengers. So this TVA slogan of "for all time always" is at least somewhat a lie. Like, it hasn't been always. There was a whole other stage of the universe where things were a multiverse. So this is really a myth cooked up to inflate their importance. And actually, you can see at the bottom, this was written by the Time Variance Authority Narrative Commission, proving that they have an in-house propaganda department. This whole thing is like the Big Brother Ministry of Truth. But back to the cartoon, the past multiversal war is represented by this interesting fuselage in deep space. Maybe we're seeing the aftermath of a conflict among the Celestials, because we know from the severed head of the Celestial Nowhere that some war caused that. Maybe they're gonna go with
God, I would
the
love to
Symbiote
see
null
that
decapitated
shit.
him, but I think the Celestials are gonna be involved with it. And then we follow some animation inspired by Rocky and Bullwinkle, specifically the Mr. Peabody and Sherman shorts. We follow this yellow man in a bow tie, whose variants toggle from a sea captain to this brute to a mug to a mad scientist to a top hat guy. But notice how each incorporates his bow tie. He's still essentially the same snob. And if this does represent Loki, we do later see Loki in a turtleneck from trailer footage, and that top hat form could be Loki as Jack the Ripper, maybe another real world mystery that Loki could have been behind the way he was DB Cooper. And then
Yeah,
we
that's
also
a
see this
dark
yellow man
one.
leading some kind of uprising in a battle involving a race that looks a bit like the Kree. Meanwhile, the ships on the right look a lot like the ruins of Titan, Thanos' homeworld that we saw in Infinity War.
Yeah.
So maybe this uprising is against the Titan colony of Eternals that Thanos' father Alars established. And then Miss Minutes goes on.
Stepping off your path created a Nexus event, which left unchecked could branch off into madness, leading to another multiversal war.
Nexus events, reminding us how WandaVision defined the Scarlet Witch as a Nexus being, a character from the Marvel Comics with the ability to rewrite reality, serving as a linchpin, bridging their reality with others. And by saying branch off into madness, leading to another multiversal war, yeah, I think it's a strong sign that the sacred timeline here could be doomed to unravel, leading to a repeat of the historical cycle in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, in which Wanda's search for her children via the Darkhold could cause another spark between realities. And Miss Minutes ends with,
Just make sure you have your ticket and you'll be seen by the next available attendant.
yeah, notice how Miss Minutes is an extreme close-up here. Just a very stern warning signaling just how seriously they take tickets. And Martin says,
What are you raising your voice with me, Buckethead?
yeah, I love that they kept in Fatum's little stammer on the word raising, and Martin gets horrifically reset, and Loki shows his ticket like all the passengers in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
No
But before we
ticket.
continue, this video is brought to you by Curiosity Stream, the award-winning destination for
All right,
documentary series and features. It's
Beep,
smart
boop,
TV
boop.
for your smart TV. Use code NEWROCKSTAR to sign $14.99 Loki title letters flicker in with a white glow on this black background, and at one point the O has little horns, like Loki's horned crown, leading us to Aix-en-Provence, France, 1549. TVA agent Mobius, Owen Wilson, is based on Mobius in the comics. We also heard the word Mobius back in Endgame when Tony Stark figured out time travel.
In the shape of a Mobius strip, inverted, please.
Now, some mystery killer lured in these Minutemen here to steal their reset charge, using an anachronistic item dropped in the past. In this case, kablooey gum, given to a kid.
Tu sais qui a fait ça?
Because notice the garb, it's green and gold too.
Yeah, I'm gonna get this out of the way. No, this is not Mephisto. The series creators confirmed it. It's really just meant to reflect Loki as a horned, ambitious god, like Lucifer, cast out of his heaven. We get a further clue when Mobius is handed Loki variant L1130's rap sheet. It's all listed out here. He is Loki Laufeyson because he was actually born son of Laufey, the frost giant from Jotunheim, before becoming Odin's ward, thus his alias of Odinson. His sex is listed as fluid. Haha! So this is a huge confirmation of the theory that we've had for over a year now, that the alternate Loki that they are chasing is in fact a female form, probably played by Sophia DiMartino, most likely going to be Lady Loki. Now in the comics, Lady Loki isn't really an alternate timeline Loki, but rather a post-Ragnarok female body intended for a reincarnated soul of Lady Sif, but instead possessed by the soul of Loki. Now, this episode did clarify that Loki has a soul, but I think they're going to be using timeline logic instead because somehow that's simpler. Now, in the courtroom are murals depicting figures with red sashes and a legal scale. These must be the TVA judges. And one of those judges with his glasses and his mustache looks kind of like a younger Stan Lee. Other murals show TVA clerks and technicians. These could be
I missed that one.
The army of Minutemen. And on the other side, the timekeepers overseeing the sacred timeline. Presiding over Loki's case with the three timekeeper faces looming behind is Justice Ravonna Renslayer Gugu Mbatha-Raw, who in the comics is associated with Kang the Conqueror. One of the many reasons I've been speculated this time-traveling villain, confirmed to come up in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, played by Jonathan Majors, might show up in this show. Loki casts blame on the Avengers.
Oh, believe me,
that
you
would
can
make
smell
sense.
The cologne of two Tony Starks.
Call back to Ant-Man making fun of Tony's scent.
Is that Axe body spray?
Yeah, I had a can in the desk for emergencies, relax.
And Mobius shows Loki that TVA, the vast grid of spires and platforms, all with numerical designations, like we see T282, this all seems to go on forever, likely the MCU's version of the null time zone, the TVA home dimension that's removed from time and space. And Loki responds by saying,
This place is a nightmare.
That's another department. Now that department I'll help you burn down.
Huh. Now what would these
Yeah,
time cops care
I was puzzled
people's
about that.
nightmares? Unless maybe their
Throw
power
up an eyebrow
comes
to
from
it.
another dimension where cosmic beings like Nightmare reside. Nightmare being a cosmic entity in the Marvel Comics, a villain to Doctor Strange, who could show up in the second Doctor Strange movie. But I also like the theory that maybe when things are retconned, they live on in people's subconsciouses, and that's where nightmares come from. Now the elevator buttons all correspond
Maybe even
to
deja
some
vu.
character alphanumeric code that don't seem to refer to anything specific yet, but I think it's just a sign of how complex and Dewey Decimal like the different floors of the TVA are. Though in the end credits, when these appear on the screen, the code 1EJ is immediately hit with access denied. So there is some part of the TVA that is off limits. Now in the Time Theater, Mobius sips a Josta, a discontinued soft drink from the late 90s. Similar to that Boku fruit juice that we've seen in the trailer footage, the TVA might be able to access all the food and drinks that you can't get anymore. And in this interrogation, Loki explains
That's a
why he
convenient
wanted to rule.
bonus
I would have made it
of working
easy for
there.
him. The first and most oppressive lie ever uttered was the Song of Freedom.
Yes, connecting to his speech in Germany, which Mobius actually shows him among his greatest hits in the TVA Holo projector.
The bright lure of freedom diminishes your life's joy in a mad scramble for power.
Now, Mobius reminds Loki about Agent Coulson.
Oh yeah, Phil Coulson. Didn't the Avengers come together to literally avenge him?
If you believe that whole sacred timeline explanation, this could be another nail in the coffin of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.'s canonicity, since that show assumes Coulson did not really die. Though don't worry, if this ends with the sacred timeline blowing up into a multiverse, one of those alternate timelines could just be the one Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is all set in. So we're still good, I think. Notice how the Battle of New York highlights freeze on the waitress Beth. That character, played by Ashley Johnson, Chrissy Siever from Growing Pains, birthplace of Ralph Boner.
Take a look at this. Jesus Christ.
That was a Cap subplot that was cut from that first Avengers movie, or we can now look at it as a pruned branch storyline that Mobius could be interested in. And we learned Loki was real-life mystery hijacker D.B. Cooper.
From the flight deck, Captain William A. Scott, North
Yeah, William Scott was actually the name of the pilot of that Northwest Orient 305 in 1971 when DB Cooper, or someone using that alias, hijacked a flight and jumped out of the plane with $200,000 in stolen cash. Notice how here Heimdall catches Loki via the Bifrost, leaving some cash floating, a nod to the fact that all they ever found of DB Cooper was some cash floating in the Columbia River. It was all Loki all along. And it was all because Loki apparently lost a bet to Thor, who's all in on this. Just a reminder of how much of a reckless jerk Thor used to be. Now, as Mobius helps Loki up, you can see the moment in Loki's eyes when he spots the time twister in his pocket, and notice how his swipe is distracted by B-15's entrance.
Huh.
Then while Loki sneaks around, another
I missed
variant
that
gets detained in
detail.
the background, I gotta say, looks a bit like Peggy Carter, doesn't it? Just would be interesting because according to the Endgame directors, Cap living his life with Peggy created a branch timeline, what the TVA might now consider to be a variant nexus violation. Though really the variant perpetrator in that case would be old Steve, not his poor wife, so I don't know. So Loki sneaks off and finds...
They would still be deleted. Again, we talked about this a little bit, and I've talked about it in the comments before. The writers of Endgame have a different opinion than the directors of Endgame on how that played out. The directors themselves, the Russo brothers, said that he lived in a branch timeline. The writers said that he went, after he returned the stones, he went into the past of the main timeline and lived out his days and was the mystery man that Peggy never talked about. You know, when Steve meets her, she's like, oh, she did get married. She did have like a life without Steve, with somebody, but we never learned who that somebody was, and she never revealed it because makes sense if that would be Steve, because otherwise we see how quickly the TVA works in this. So like the second something went wrong and was out of place, would they not have just returned Cap to the future where he's supposed to be, or just erased all of that timeline? I think the less muddy situation is if Cap just went back to the singular time stream at an earlier point, lived out his days, and then on the day that he was to give the shield to Sam, he just came back and gave it to him. Because he knows what day the funeral would be on because he's already attended it. That's my thought. I feel like that's a better way to do that than the branched timeline thing. Because they already know the creating branches is what they are not supposed to do, so why would Cap willingly do that? Willingly going back to the beginning of his own timeline and living back in that time would make sense. Peggy Carter's the most upstanding person probably in the MCU, so she's probably would take that secret to the grave, and that way they wouldn't alter any of the world's events. And Steve Rogers, greater good, would have to let everything play out the way it does, because if he doesn't, the world and Earth would not be prepared to defend itself against any of the threats that would come in the future. So, what? Because there's also the argument, it was like, well, if he was there the whole time, why didn't he try to prevent things? Why was he okay with Bucky being taken over by Hydra and all that crap? And I was like, because if he deviates time from that, these space wizards, these aliens, all that, are going to come to Earth. If he gave everybody their happy ending, if he prevented all their suffering, they would never become the heroes they were meant to be, and Earth would not be prepared for an onslaught, and it would be destroyed. Cap is smart enough to know that. That's my idea. Anyway, this veered off into a tangent. Go.
It's Casey, who returns the Tesseract and reveals a whole evidence drawer filled with variant Infinity Stones.
How do you have these?
Oh, we actually got a lot of those. Yeah, some of the guys use them as paperweights, some of them.
So how do they get these? Well, maybe each variant they've caught may have been in possession of an Infinity Stone, since the ancient ones seem to suggest that only the removal of stones could cause branches from the sacred timeline, and maybe with each pruning, the stolen stone was just restored back to the sacred timeline, leaving this stone in the TVA as a kind of powerless carbon copy receipt of it. Now in this box you can see red reality stones, green time stones, purple power stones, blue space stones, a couple chunky orange soul stones, though though, interestingly, no yellow Mind Stones available. And then Loki picks up a Time Stone, as if of all these, the one he would want the most is the ability to reverse time. Also in this drawer is a super rare T206 Honus Wagner baseball card, a casino chip for 5,000, and some kind of military medal. And then later in the end credits, you can actually see a Mind Stone being used as a paperweight. I also have to wonder what Casey meant by some of the agents use the Infinity Stones as paperweights. Could some past TVA agent have snatched one of these, went into the timeline, and started wreaking havoc to become Kang? I'm gonna go with that explanation. Kang gang for life. B-15 finds Loki, tries to reset him, but instead erases
Wasn't
Casey's
there like an
evidence
arc
card,
reactor
showing
in
that
there
in addition
too?
to the variants, people and things in the TVA can be retcannoned to somewhere. Loki scrubs back through Frigga's death with this interesting music playing.
The music in this episode was so
mournful violin
beautiful.
melody was composed by the Loki composer Natalie Holt, who is clearly very talented, though I gotta mention this because it's amazing. She used to work as a backup musician on Britain's Got Talent, and she freaking egged Simon Cowell for ruining the music industry. A freaking badass. Loki also mourns Odin.
I love you, my sons.
Yeah, focusing on one of my favorite details from Thor Ragnarok, Tom Hiddleston's reaction to Odin finally considering Loki a son. And finally, Loki arrives at his death. Yeah, the framing makes it look like future Loki is saying this to our variant Loki, like the ghost of Christmas future telling him to let go of his God King ambitions. And then notice
I didn't
as the
think
film
about
strip runs
that.
out, on the holoprojector it reads Tail 112914, I think 71129114 Loki Laufeyson, meaning this is the tail end of the film reel. But the weird thing is, in the close-up of the film strip, as it goes across the projector reel, it says Tail 1ETH616, 1ETH616 Loki Laufeyson. And I only point that out because 616 is the numerical
main
designation of the prime
continuity.
Marvel universe in the comics. Technically, the MCU is Earth 199999. So Loki ends up confessing to Mobius.
I don't enjoy hurting people. It's part of the illusion.
So Loki, even back in 2012, was never a sadist. He's just a mischievous scamp who commits violence in order to gain power. He's projecting an illusion of his fearsomeness. And that is the confirmation Mobius has been wanting with all this questioning. Really, this was all a Voight Kemp test to determine if Loki had any humanity in him. And now that Mobius knows that he does, he gives Loki this assignment, a chance to destroy the worst parts of himself.
The variant we're hunting is you.
And so the epilogue goes to an oil field in Salina, Oklahoma in 1858, where Hunter U-92 investigates this interesting device.
Time signature is early 3rd millennium. Definitely anachronistic.
Early 3rd millennium would be now, I guess? You think first millennium is 0 to year 1000, second millennium is 1000 to 2000, so early 3rd millennium would be sometime between 2000 and 2300, I guess? Either way, it is a sign that we are looking at some villain with access to future technology. And here is our hooded villain, our evil Loki variant, burning them all in hellfire as that stained glass demon foretold. Actually, in that art, there is a moon, which to me recalls the trailer footage of Sophia DiMartino's character in the shadow of a collapsing moon. Who is she exactly? We will find out. Now, the end credit sequence is filled with cool visual details, so many that I actually have to break it down in a separate video coming tomorrow. But a few things I gotta note here.
Alrighty
Among
then.
some math pinned to an office wall is an equation whose name is partially obscured, but it looks like Schrodinger's equation. I'm not certain if this is actually Schrodinger's equation. Quantum physics nerds, forgive me if it isn't. He was one of the early theoretical physicists who really pioneered quantum mechanics that Loki's branch timeline logic is really based on. Schrodinger, of course, famous for his Schrodinger cat thought experiment, in which an unobserved cat is both alive and dead simultaneously, essentially saying we all kind of exist in separate realities. There's an apocalyptic event report describing the events of the D.B. Cooper hijacking from Seattle 1971. Just interesting that the TVA categorizes that as an apocalyptic event. Just making me think that they might consider it on par with events like the destruction of Pompeii, which we also will see in this series. There's also a variant diagram showing 5 different variants. There's one with a circle head, and then the other heads shaped as a square, a triangle, pentagon, hexagon, and then an X, just like the number of variants we saw the yellow cartoon guy have. And then the credit visuals end with the faces of the timekeepers of the courtroom punching in specifically on the center one before cutting to black, which I have said before does look a bit like the face of Jonathan Majors, who's gonna play Kang. And interesting that Kang's lover Ravonna Renslayer was framed directly in that figure's lips. And lastly, if you stick around all the way to the end of the credits, you can hear the voice of who? Miss Minutes coming back.
Thanks for visiting the TVA. Don't hesitate to let us know how we're doing.
And after this great first episode, I think you guys are doing great. Another reminder to support this channel by checking out our great Loki-inspired merch options at newrockstarsmerch.com. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at...
Subscribe to these guys if you are not. Man, they put a lot of work into this stuff, into digging through these details and researching everything they can for these. Definitely putting in the work that I literally do not have the time to do. I did this full time, maybe. I've done it like one attempt at something similar to this, as when I was breaking down the Godzilla, one of the Godzilla versus Kong trailers. Went deep and hard into that thing, man. Anyway, something I did want to comment on. He's not the only one to suggest that one of the timekeepers may be Kang. And maybe that is the case. We do know Kang is coming. We know who is playing Kang, and we know when he is going to play a major part, of course, in Ant-Man 3. And I said this in my reaction to the first episode, is we know Multiverse of Madness is happening. We know it's an event that is coming, that the multiverse is going to exist again. And one of the things that makes me wonder what happens in this show is, how can that happen if the TVA is still functioning? Shouldn't be able to, right? They'd be able to stop it, stamp it out, what have you. So this Loki variant is collecting reset dials, those reset canisters. My thought is, what if Kang is one of the timekeepers and does go off to wreak his own havoc, do his own thing for once, maybe even helping this Loki variant do what they're doing. That might be a little bit of a stretch, but I think at the end of the day, those reset canisters, what would Loki or a Loki variant want with those? What would be the one thing that a Loki that hasn't gone through this journey of self-realization would want? Is freedom. They would want that freedom because they're the only ones that are in the right mind to control the world. They don't like being controlled. We saw that with this version of Loki. They hate the idea of being under anybody's thumb. So, where would they take those charges? Why would they need so many? What if they're collecting them? And they're going to take it once they have as many as they need to the TVA and erase, retcon the TVA, making it to where the TVA can no longer interfere in the lives of the world, and thus no one is protecting the sacred timeline, and the multiverse just unravels. The timeline unravels, it splinters, it breaks, and we get What If, we get the Nexus event that Wanda's creating, and we're getting Multiverse of Madness, whatever shenanigans are happening in Spider-Man No Way Home. Like, it clearly, because it's not a secret, is unraveling and is going to unravel. So I've got to think, and I've got to imagine, that the TVA is either going to be sabotaged or destroyed by the end of the show. Because how can all these other things play out? Because they seem pretty well equipped to keep these things at bay. So I'd have to be shocked if they're still around and this multiverse still gets out of hand. So yeah, guys, this is a longer video. If you have stuck it through by this point, I hope you liked it. Hope you subscribe and stick around. We're going to be reacting to Loki every week as it comes out. We're doing Bad Batch as well. I cover a lot of the DC shows as well if you're interested in those. Otherwise, I'd love to know your thoughts. So yeah, sound off in the comments. Let me know your thoughts down below. We'll carry on the conversation after the video, guys. I will also be having a live stream Saturday, probably around 4 p.m., 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I do these every weekend, every Saturday. It's called Whining with Omni, where I drink some wine and whine about shit. And we just kind of talk about shows throughout the week and might play a game if it's slow. Who knows? I hope you come in there. If you got any questions for me that I don't get to in the comments or anything like that, we can have a conversation there. So that all being said, guys, before we go, I want to give a shout out to our channel legends, Mandy Sherritt, Ryan Karen, and Jason Coleman. Thank you guys so much for your support. Thank you everybody who's been signing up for the Patreon, especially the new memberships who are coming in here for Loki. Thank you guys. You can get access to the full reactions, all that junk, over on Patreon, or if you just become a member here on the channel, whichever one's more convenient for you if you're interested at all. We have a Discord open now. Link to that is in the description of this video, as well as all my socials. I hope to see you guys there. And otherwise, I will catch you guys in the next episode of Loki, or the next breakdown from New Rockstars, whichever one comes first. But thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys next time. Take care, everybody.